everyone, it's Hamsa Sandra. Hopefully I can make this video in time. Today I wanted to talk about, it's like a story time video. And I wanted to talk about, there's sometimes in life that there's certain situations that are just not your path to bear. And I'm going to talk about classically one that was not my path to bear. And that happened to be when my father passed away. Some of you know that my father passed away on January 26th of this year, 2016, and I couldn't afford the flight to get out there. Literally, when I found on the 19th that he was in the hospital, my father had colon cancer, and he had been sick for a while, and I didn't know exactly how bad his cancer was, but he wasn't like kind of taking care of himself towards the end, and I think personally my father kind of gave up because he knew his cancer was terminal. So they had stopped the chemo, I think 2 or 3 weeks prior to him passing away. And my dad was also diabetic. My dad also has some other health issues that was going on. He didn't have a spleen. His spleen was taken out when he was a kid. So he had some other medical issues that also as well. So it's actually very surprisingly he did so well considering. But when they stopped the chemo, my dad wasn't calling as much, and I had heard from my brother that he kind of wasn't taking care of himself. He kind of wasn't eating right. He wasn't, wasn't just doing things that he should have been doing as far as like eating properly and et cetera, et cetera. So I knew my dad was really failing in health. And with chemo, it takes a lot out of you. And my dad had a nurse that was coming in, and the nurses were really starting to get concerned, but my dad was very, very stubborn, very independent, and trying to talk to my dad about, going into an assisted care living situation my dad was very, very hard-headed. It was very, very difficult trying to do all that, and we were trying to go in that route. And my dad was slowly starting to go in that route, like, hey, I definitely need help. But suddenly he got sick, really sick. On the 19th, which was the day before my birthday, I had found out that he had pneumonia. And things just went way downhill from there. My father decided to do a DNR, which means do not resuscitate. So my dad just knew it was he was done. He was done fighting. So things just started going more downhill. And I was starting to do the grieving process of I'm going to lose my dad because I knew my dad was dying. So when I knew my dad was starting to die, I was literally begging on the internet for funds to get out to where my dad was living, which happens to be Iowa. And I couldn't get the funds raised in time, and it was like, I think on the 25th is when I was starting, because I was like, I need the next plane ticket out. I just knew my dad was dying. It's just who I am. I knew my dad was dying, and I knew my dad was also waiting for me to go out there, because my dad, when he was living, had a lot of regrets, because my dad was a horrible man way back when my dad was younger, and I grew up, I knew my dad had some regrets in the only last 6 years of my dad when he was living. We really made a lot of amends and a lot of forgiveness, which I will talk about in the forgiveness series that I'm going to be talking about. So I knew my dad was waiting for me because we had done all this healing and this miraculous 180-degree change in our lives over the past, 6 years, 5 years, or whatever had it been. So I knew my dad was waiting for me as well. So, and I had been talking to my dad, as far as spiritually, I had been talking to my dad, trying to connect to him in the spirit world and sitting there saying, Dad, it's okay. It's okay for you to go. I will be okay. You know, I kept on talking to him that way. So the 25th of January, my brother finally called me and says, we will get you a ticket to fly out there, which I was very, very grateful, and thank you for the universe to bless that. But they were trying to get me on the next flight, which the next flight they could get out, it was by the time they could get me out, then they couldn't get me to the airport in time for me to fly out. So there you go. The universe sat there and said it wasn't my time to be out on that flight, to go out and fly out at that time. So the universe didn't want me to fly out on the 25th. I missed the last connecting flight to fly out that evening. So I missed that flight. So the next flight I could get out was early morning on the 26th. So I flew out and I saw this beautiful sunrise flying out. And I remember that sunrise so clearly. And I remember taking a picture of it while I was on the plane. And I just kept on asking the universe, just let me get there, let me get there. And also the 26th of January is a very special day for me because it's also my daughter's birthday. And I just kept on asking the universe, don't let him die today, don't let him die today, not on my daughter's birthday. And I just remember the sunrise. And I ended up flying into Kansas City. My father actually lives in Iowa. And when I got there, actually my connecting flight, I can't remember where I connected at. Honestly, I can't remember where I connected at. But in my connecting flight, I got a text from my brother saying that a friend of his was actually coming to pick me up instead of them coming to pick me up, which I totally understood. I was like, okay, no problem. Another person was coming to pick me up, not a family member. So I was perfectly okay with that. I have blue hair. They're not going to miss me. Kansas City Airport isn't that big. So I knew somebody wasn't going to miss me. And so they came and they picked me up. I was awesome. I met a gentleman that was sitting next to me on the plane. We had a wonderful conversation. While we were on the plane. I made a great connection with this person that was sitting on the plane. So when I got off the plane, he stayed with me the whole entire time, helped me with my walker, helped me with everything that I had. I was really beat down, and spiritually, my energy was down because all I wanted to do was get to Iowa. I just wanted to get to Iowa. That's all. My focus was just purely on getting to Iowa. Well, my brother's friend arrived, and she proceeds to tell me, this was at 1:30? Yes. She proceeds to tell me that we needed to wait because she was picking up her sister also at the airport at 2:30. And I was like, okay. And I'm very patient and I'm very loving and I'm very kind. And she knew my father was dying. And I was like, okay, you know, and I was all right. And I didn't express my, hey, I want to get to my father, but because she knew. And I just let it be. And, you know, we waited she asked me if I wanted any lunch, and I told her no, I'm okay, I wasn't hungry. And she asked me if I wanted anything to drink, and I said no, I think I had some water in my water bottle, and I appreciated her hospitality on that. I just sat there and I think I told her I just honestly wanted just to see my dad. And we waited, and she did like a little roundabout in the parking lot, and we kind of waited until it was time for her sister to pick up her sister. And we picked up her sister, and I go, well, I just have one request before we head off on the road, because I knew we had a little bit of a trek to get to where we needed to go, so if we could use the restroom. So we went, and she goes, well, we're all girls, we need to go to use the restroom. So we went off, and we got up to one of the convenience store, and us girls went and used the restroom and did our thing, and they came out and they got some big gulps or whatever, and I didn't get myself anything to drink, because I ended up, I had very low budget for funds, because I ended up doing a GoFundMe, and I did get I think about $200, and that money I had to use for food. and whatever necessities, like luggage fees and stuff like that. So my budget was extremely tight, so I didn't want to spend any money. So I didn't get anything to drink or anything. I just wanted to get to Iowa. So as we were driving, I heard my her phone go off, and it was like asking, you know, how long is it going to be until we get there? How long is it going to be until we get there? How long is it going to be until we get there? And she was giving her like an ETA, an ETA, an ETA. And I think the ETA was in like 4:35 o'clock or something like that. I can't remember what the ETA was. And next thing I know, something about I'm going to call Linnell. Linnell's my middle name, and that's the childhood name I grew up with being called. So I grabbed my phone and had my phone in my hand. I knew when my sister-in-law called me, I knew my father had passed away. I knew immediately that my father had passed away. So I answered the phone, and sure enough, my father had passed away. My father had passed away at 3:23 or something like that in the afternoon, or 3:21 or something like that in the afternoon. So I was literally en route on my way to go see my dad. I had already touched down on the flight and literally was en route to go see my dad. Now, if we would have left at the time that I had gotten from the airport, I would have probably seen my dad pass away. So, needless to say, shortly after that, I'm making phone calls and doing my thing. And I remember looking out, and I seen him. The sun was starting to set about this time. It wasn't really trying to set, but the sun starting to turn those like pretty colors. And I remember the sun having what they call the God rays or whatever. The sun was peeking through the clouds, and it was really, really pretty. And I took another picture. I never posted that one on Instagram, but I remember the sun coming down, and I looked out and I go, okay, it was not my path. It was not my road. And I remember her apologizing, and I literally sat there and explained to her, because I had this conversation with my nephew not even 2 days prior. So they're saying sometimes it's not your road and not your path to be there on certain things. So it was not my time, and it was not my place to be there when my father had passed away. As much as it hurt me that I was not there at the time that my father passed away, it was not my road and it was not my path to be there when my father passed away. And I also discussed this during his memorial funeral service. I made that same comment during the funeral service about, sometimes in life I described the analogy this way. You have this wonderful, beautiful road that sits in front of you, and it's just God's country that's absolutely gorgeous and beautiful and beautiful and beautiful and beautiful, and you're driving along and just seeing this gorgeous, beautiful scenery, and you're just driving along, and you're just like, oh, this is just wonderful, 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 and it's meant for you to see that beautiful scenery. And then sometimes you just hit traffic, and you got to deal with that traffic, and you got to deal with all that, the potholes and the screaming and the hollering and the flipping off and the horrible mess that, the road rage and so forth. And you have to deal with that, because that's what life, that's what part of that life that you have to deal with at that moment in time, because that is what the universe wants you to deal with, because that's the lessons that you have to learn from at that moment in time. But guess what? Once you go past that, the road is absolutely going to be beautiful for you again. So in that moment in time, it was meant for me to have this beautiful scenery. It was meant for me to have that beautiful sunrise, and to see the beautiful rays coming out of the clouds. That's what the universe wanted me to see, instead of my dad take his last breath. So those are the lessons that you have to learn from my little bit of my story time, that sometimes the universe puts certain things in your life for you to bear and to deal with, and then certain things are just not meant for you to bear with. So that if there's anything you can learn from this little bit of this story time video, I hope you can learn something. Anyways, peace and love, and I love you guys. I hope you guys have a beautiful day.